Hey, and welcome to another video on my very new YouTube channel, The OCD Warrior. You can find me on Facebook under OCD Warrior and also under Becky Jane Stevenson. So I wanted to do a quick video, so I'm really sorry that I'm kind of holding my phone so it's a little bit shaky. I wanted to do a quick video just highlighting a couple of posts that I've come across in the last day or two in some of the OCD and intrusive thought support groups. Now, I haven't been active on here for the last few days because I am just launching a warrior workbook, but I hope to have regular videos uploaded to this channel. So this video was inspired by a couple of posts by people in some support groups that they no longer feel the kind of intense anxiety and distress with their intrusive thoughts anymore. Now, the posters had put that they'd been working on sitting with the thoughts, or they'd been in therapy such as CBT, and doing the exposure response exercises as well. Now, those of you that know the treatment for OCD and overcoming the impact of intrusive thoughts is to actually accept the thoughts, to sit with them, to allow yourself to feel the anxiety and also feel that anxiety start to come down and start to subside without doing anything to kind of push the thoughts away, to distract the mind from the thoughts, to neutralize them, or engaging in physical compulsions. So the treatment is to just accept the thoughts as just thoughts, that they are not a perceived danger or a threat, or don't have a deeper meaning that, you know, it must mean something about us or our personality or what we're capable of. So as we're going through treatment with CBT, the ERP is graded, so a therapist will start you off on low triggers and have you sitting with that anxiety and letting it come down, and then gradually build up to the more extreme triggers that really cause that intense anxiety and that distress and feeling like you need to do something to reduce the risk of the perceived threat. Now, as we're going through ERP and we are practicing that, essentially what we are doing is we are diverting the brain away from the habit that we've got ourselves into. So the habit is obsession, anxiety, distress, the need to do a compulsion, and then relief when we have completed that compulsion. That only serves to perpetuate the obsession and compulsive cycle, so it will keep those intrusive thoughts going, because we're essentially, what we're doing is we are teaching the brain that these thoughts are something to be feared, these thoughts are something that we have to do something about to reduce the risk. Now, because we have that habit set up, the way to undo it is to do something completely the opposite, so don't respond to the thought. Then as the brain acclimatizes itself to there's actually no threat, so why am I feeling this anxiety? There's no need, because it is just a thought. And the more that we do that, the more we kind of become desensitized to these thoughts. The brain starts to learn that it's triggering off the anxiety for no reason, because it's just a thought. So it starts to learn that it doesn't need to trigger off that fight or flight. It doesn't need to set off that distress signal. It doesn't need to set off that anxiety, because it's a thought. So we have over 70,000 thoughts a day, which I've explained in previous videos. We don't react with distress and anxiety with all of those 70,000 thoughts. Now, I know you're probably sitting there thinking, there is no way I have 70,000 thoughts a day. Most of them do not happen within our awareness. So the ones that we notice are the ones that are in our immediate awareness. The rest of them are kind of filtered out, they're in our subconscious, and we don't even notice them. So once we begin to set up that habit, it takes, they say, around 21 days to a month to set up a new brain habit, for us to start doing that automatically and not actually having to think about it. So as the brain's learning, it stops setting off the anxiety, it stops setting off the distress, and it learns it's just a passing thought. Now, unfortunately, when people are working through this, they then become fearful that because they're not feeling the distress and that they're not feeling the anxiety, that it must mean that these thoughts have some kind of truth to them, that there is actually a threat, that it is something that could potentially happen, that it does mean something about them. When actually all that's happened is we've set a new brain habit up to stop reacting with anxiety and distress to that thought. So if you have got to that stage and you are kind of getting yourself worried and worked up that you're not feeling that anxiety anymore, it's because you have worked well and you have successfully managed how to retrain your brain and how to rewire it into responding in a much more healthier way. Now, unfortunately, with some people, that worry and the distress, because they don't know where the anxiety's gone, can often pull them back into another OCD cycle because they don't like the uncertainty, because there's no anxiety there and they're wondering where it's gone, and then they're like, what if these thoughts are real? That's another uncertainty that they're not able to tolerate. So then again, comes a need to carry out the compulsions again, because the what if is just too much for them to handle. Like I say, the right way is to get that anxiety down, and not to respond to the thoughts. That anxiety will kind of dissipate, the distress won't be there anymore. And just to kind of share a really personal experience with me last year, I was feeling extreme anxiety and distress almost constantly every day for like 2 weeks. I was very exhausted, and very overwhelmed. And then, because I've done ERP and self-guided ERP quite a lot, I understood the way to overcome those thoughts. So I was doing self-guided ERP and I overcome the thoughts. Then what I was left with is, why aren't I feeling that anxiety? That anxiety is what's keeping me safe, because at least if I know the anxiety and the distress is there, then that means I want the opposite of what the thoughts are saying. So you can kind of easily fall into the trap of hanging on to that anxiety and hanging on to that distress, because then if you hang on to those, then that means you want the opposite to your thoughts, when actually it's actually going to keep you in that cycle and it's going to keep it going. So you need to see hanging on to anxiety and distress as a burning hot coal. Okay, and this hot coal is burning your hand. What do we need to be doing with that hot coal? We need to drop it. Okay, so just because you are not feeling the anxiety or distress towards those thoughts anymore does not mean that those thoughts are true. It doesn't mean that there's any fact to them. It just simply means that your brain has learned that it doesn't need to respond in that way to those thoughts, and that you can just let them pass by. Be the observer. Let them be there. You don't need to engage with them. You don't need to interact with them. You don't need to think, oh my God, what does that mean? Just let them pass by. And the more you can practice that, the more you'll start to see that your intrusive thoughts and your fears will start to actually come down, because the brain will learn that it doesn't need to respond to these thoughts, so they can just be a subconscious one. Now, for the most part, 99% of the time, I'm aware my intrusive thoughts are there. They're always kind of in the background, a little bit of noise, but that doesn't mean I need to do anything about it. I can just let them be there, because they don't need to interrupt what I'm doing for the day. It doesn't need to interrupt what activity I'm doing. I don't need to do anything with it, and let it be there. And before I know it, it's not background noise anymore. It's gone. So just to kind of recap, I'm seeing quite a common theme in intrusive thought support groups and OCD support groups, where people are becoming worried because they've got so used to their anxiety and distress responses that they're becoming anxious when they're not feeling that anxiety. So by doing that, we're kind of in a roundabout way reacting again to intrusive thoughts, just not directly, it's kind of indirect. So then, as I say, it kind of leads us back into another obsession and compulsion cycle. So there is nothing wrong. The thoughts, just because you don't feel the anxiety and distress anymore, does not mean that there's something wrong, does not mean that there's a real threat or a real danger, doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or that the thoughts are true. It just simply means that you have worked well in successfully managing your reactions to your intrusive thoughts. So celebrate that fact. Be super duper proud of yourselves, because that is a huge, huge achievement. And just continue on as you are doing. So I hope this video has been really helpful. If you have any comments, again, drop them down below in the comments, or you can contact me or reach out on Facebook. And just to kind of bring up again, I did in my last videos, I think, but I was launching a clothing line. So obviously you can see OCD Warrior on my hat. That is my branding label. And I have statements such as these. So I have those thoughts too. So this is wearable empowerment for the mental health communities. This one was particularly set up for OCD communities. And it's just, I don't know, if I was to see you in the street and I read this on your t-shirt or your hoodie or your jacket, I'd feel that instant connection without having to say anything. I would know that there's somebody there that understands what I'm going through. But also this empowers me, because a lot of the time OCD can feel very isolating, because it's still, some of the topics and some of the themes that show up in people with OCD are very, very taboo subjects, such as paedophilia OCD, harm OCD, and a lot of people don't feel confident enough to talk to somebody about them. They feel quite ashamed, quite embarrassed. They feel like maybe they're a sicko, or that there's some truth to these thoughts. So just by wearing this, you know, this says I have those thoughts too. There are other people out there. There are countless other people out there that are probably having the same. In fact, I know they will be having the same thoughts as you. So these are just to say you are not alone, that recovery is possible. So unfortunately there's no cure for OCD, but recovery is possible, where you can reach a point where it's practically dormant, and then when it does crop up, you have the tools and the knowledge to work through it again, so that it doesn't impact you as severely. And that's the ultimate goal, is managing how we respond to these thoughts. It's reminding ourselves of the things that we do well, reminding ourselves of the tools and the strategies to work through these intrusions. So this is a reason for clothing such as this. It just really does bring a sense of community, and hopefully my hope for the future with this brand is to break down some of the stereotyping that goes on with OCD. So the typical misconception that OCD is to do with germs and cleaning and hoarding and things, but also just to break down the stigma. So there are many people that have approached me when I've been out and about, because I do wear them in public, that have asked what this means. They've asked about OCD, or they'll go, oh, you have OCD, I like cleaning, or, you know, it's a conversation starter to help somebody that doesn't really understand about OCD. It gives an opportunity to educate, but in a polite and positive way. So yeah, that's all from me. I look forward to bringing you the next video.